You're listening to In the Chair, a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. Find out more at masonicpodcast.com. But first, welcome your host, Robert Bone.
Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to In the Chair, a podcast about Freemasonry for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. I'm Robert Bone, and many thanks for hitting the download. We're up to episode 23. I hope you've enjoyed the previous 22. If you haven't heard them yet, get onto iTunes, get onto Stitcher, go onto the website, masonicpodcast.com, and you can hear and listen to them all there. Of course, download them onto your iPhones and whatever you need to do, and of course make sure you subscribe. And the reason I say make sure you subscribe as well is because today's interview I'm actually splitting into two parts. I felt this was a very important interview. At the time when I was recording it, I knew it was getting on, but I didn't want to stop it. In my brain I'm thinking, this is gold what we're hitting on. It's too important information just to gloss over and then go, okay, anyway, we've got to wrap it up now. So I took the decision, keep it recording, put it into two parts. Hopefully, I mean, obviously the conversation's going to be a bit abrupt when it finishes because we didn't decide whereabouts the cut-off point was going to be. So, that wasn't prearranged. That was just one of those things I thought I'm going to have to try to edit this somehow together. But the reason why it's sort of so long is, I'll introduce it. How I got this book. I was on Amazon, and with Amazon, it recommends reading based on previous purchases. And of course, I've bought books on Freemasonry. This one came up, and it said "Managing the Future of Freemasonry: A Book of Optimism" by David West. And I thought that sounds quite interesting. Clicked it, had a flick through as you can do on Amazon, see the contents, see the what it's about on the back, and I thought I've got to get this book. Got it, barely got it in my hands, flicked through it, and thought I've got to get David on In the Chair. What he's doing, basically, he's studied philosophy, and his theories, not on Masonic, basically looking back at the history of Freemasonry and how it can be applied today, and the problems that we're facing with the declining membership, and how actually we've had those problems before, but what at first looks like very different situations. Actually, when you look into it, when you research it, there's certain familiarities, and how we can use those to learn from the past, to how we can turn things around, how Freemasonry might have to modernise. And we look at them, we chuck ideas around. Now, bear with me. I do this podcast independently. The book that David has written is done independently. We're both English Freemasons, members of lodges that are part of the United Grand Lodge of England. And, we're not talking on behalf of the United Grand Lodge of England. We don't put them down in here. We're just basically having the conversations that maybe some people are having, or if they're not having, maybe raising the issues that may be at the back of some people's minds, but by trying to tackle them head on. So some people might not listen to this. Maybe traditional Freemasons might listen to this podcast and listen to it and go, well, actually, that's not how it used to be. And we're saying that maybe we do need to change, we do need to adapt. We're not offering solutions. What we're doing is really highlighting the problems, I guess, or at least acknowledging them, some of those, maybe to get people thinking of well, actually, maybe that is true. Maybe, how could we do that? And of course, it's taken maybe from a philosophical viewpoint, but David does actually back up in his book as well that he about everything. So the book, as I said, is called Managing the Future of Freemasonry. It's available through Lewis Masonic, obviously, and on Amazon. If you're in the UK, you can go onto Amazon by following the link masonicpodcast.com/future. That will take you through to the Amazon site for it. And of course, you can click on David's name and it will show the other books that he's written on there. And of course, with Lewis Masonic, you can go onto Lewis Masonic's website, it's lewismasonic.com. They ship internationally as well. We can see his other books on there. And the other book that I've also got that we mentioned is Masonic Recruitment. And I say book, that's more of a, I'm sure he would agree, that's a bit shorter. That's about 18 pages long. So it's more of a pamphlet. And that's based on his longer book, Things to Do When You Have Nothing to Do. And we touched on that. And even though we're spreading this interview over to podcasts, David's hopefully going to be coming back on in the future to actually talk even more about this, but more of the practical side of things. So hopefully, splitting this over 2 weeks, it will allow you to digest what we're talking about. let it sit in your brain, maybe think about it, chew on it a little bit, and then in the future, David's going to come back on and then start talking about a bit more of the practical side of things, about how he's managed to have these thoughts and put them into practice. And of course, his lodge, is actually bringing in 4 or 5 new candidates a year, and they're having to outsource their second and third degrees to other lodges. And we mentioned that during there. Now we cover a few different things. There's links to other books that you can find. All of that's covered in the show notes on episode 23. So it's masonicpodcast.com/23. That gives a summary of what we're talking about on those links. I'm going to stop talking now, hand it over to pick up this interview, and it's with David West, who's a member of St Lawrence Lodge, number 5517 in the province of Essex. Please welcome to In the Chair, the Masonic podcast, David West. And David is an author. He's written a few books about Freemasonry, some very, very interesting books. So, hello, David. Many thanks for taking some time to be on In the Chair today.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. And many thanks for taking the time. So, could you just actually very briefly, I guess, just introduce yourself and let our listeners know who you are?
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm an Essex Mason.
Right.
I was initiated in 1982.
Great.
I was master of my mother lodge in 1992.
Right.
I educated at Exeter University and got my doctorate at Leicester University.
Right.
And I taught university for several years before going into industry, where I spent the rest of my career. I retired a few years ago.
And actually, I must admit, a bit of a coincidence there. I studied at Exeter myself, but we've done, I think, different degrees. What was your degree in?
In philosophy.
In philosophy, which I think gives you quite a good grounding for not only Freemasonry, but obviously the subject of your books. You've obviously looked into quite a few things, and I've got to say, from the books that I've read, I can see your philosophical angle, and you really do reference them very well.
Thank you very much.
There's a lot.
Philosophy can be applied to all walks of life, and it actually helped me in business. I mean, apart from anything else, it teaches you to analyse what people say.
I definitely, and actually, from the book, and the book that I'm particularly I know you've obviously written a few, is Managing the Future of Freemasonry, which really jumped out at me when I saw that on I think Lewis Masonic. It's actually quite a new book, isn't it? It's
only came out just last year. Yeah,
end of last year. Because when reading it and some of the references, they are very, very current. But when you're talking about things in the book, I noticed that you are really, it's not just, here's a hypothesis you're putting forward. Everything's backed up. It seems like every page has got 2 or 3 footnotes at the bottom where you're referencing where you got the information from.
Yeah, I hope I don't overdo that, but I don't want anything just to be seen as a vague piece of opinion. I want to see that it's been backed up by evidence, historical evidence, or indeed philosophical argument.
Yes, I mean, and that ranges from newspaper articles to ancient philosophers.
Sure,
I've noticed that
the whole gamut of things. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that
really 19th century newspaper reports as well.
Yeah, so you really did cover it all, and the reason I mention that is because it is sort of a book where it could be quite a lot of theory, but by backing it up proves that the research is there. And of course, one of the things that struck me is it's about managing the future of Freemasonry, but the first third of it is actually really looking at the past. You're sort of like looking at the last 200 years of, well, not just Freemasonry. Actually, I would say you're not actually really looking at Freemasonry for the first part. It's looking at the whole social sort of conditions over the last 200 years.
Well, Freemasonry is not isolated from society.
Yes.
And I wanted to show or explain how and why our memberships declined since the 1950s. The mid-1950s is when the decline started. And it's not just Freemasonry who experienced that decline, it's all organizations of our type, if you like. And I wanted to compare that and explain it by looking at the last time Freemasonry was in deep trouble, which is in the early part of the 19th century, where it almost disappeared. And I think we can learn an awful lot from that particular event, which compares very closely to what's happening today, or has happened since the 1950s.
Because that was, I mean, to summarise, and obviously I recommend people to read the book, obviously, but to summarise it, that was I'd say the Industrial Revolution, really, wasn't it?
Yes.
And around that time, and when I first started reading it, and this is what really drew me in. I wanted to just sort of think, okay, I'll skim through the interesting, I'll skim through the history bit, get to the meat of it. But then I got really drawn into the history because it actually gives a very, very good history and account of, basically England politics and everything during those 200 years. But the bit about the Industrial Revolution, because I thought, well, how does that apply to the situation we're in today? And as I read it, you start realising that actually what was happening is people were losing their jobs because, of course, modernisation, mechanisation was coming in, and how that parallels with people, losing their jobs today, not just from the recession, but from the technical revolutions, and how those applied, and then the class system, and how all those bits come together to create an economic climate, which is actually similar to the economic climate I guess we're in at the moment. The socio-economic climate is. I'm hoping I've interpreted that correctly.
Yeah, I think you have. I think to many extents they're identical. I mean, our 18th century brethren were not obviously people in manufacturing.
No.
The business at that time was kind of village-based or small town-based at best. After all, in the 18th century, the biggest towns in Britain were Norwich and Bristol. There wasn't London at all.
Right. Okay.
And London was growing very fast, of course, and then the first part of the Industrial Revolution starts in about 1780. Now, at that time, of course, our brethren were displaced. Their jobs disappeared.
Yes.
And dramatic change occurred. I mean, and by 100 years later, there were jobs that our brethren had taken which would never been heard of.
Yes, I mean, that was one of the interesting things as well, is you break down, you have the little charts in there breaking down about the types of jobs that Masons do, because, of course, that's sort of recorded, and that's the great thing. We do actually have those records, which can then be compared to census records and everything as well over the years. And yeah, that research, and it shows how the trades have gone, and then people are becoming more employees, and the middle classes, and I mean, you really do tackle some subjects which I guess it'd be fair to say would normally be technically fall under what's not discussed at the festive board. Sometimes
probably not. No.
Yeah, I was reading some of these things, and you're talking about obviously politics and religion, and it's not like you're taking sides on anything. So I guess but looking at the overview, and that might be one of the did actually spring to my mind. Maybe thought, well, sometimes those bits might not be so much discussed how it relates to Freemasonry, because where those are sometimes the taboo subjects to be discussed in a Masonic lodge or at the festive board, maybe they might not be so much discussed as well when it's looking at the master plan or where the future of Freemasonry,
and yet they affect us dramatically.
Yes, and that was that was the thing. It almost seems to be a book about religion and politics. I wouldn't say it is, but
it's a book about Freemasonry.
Yeah, it's a book about Freemasonry, but the core subjects running through is almost like religion and politics. Not to have the views on it, but how religion and politics has, especially the sort of like the political side of things, have actually affected Freemasonry over the last 200 years or so.
Well, the audience that we actually recruited from about 1850 to 1950 was the middle class. Now that middle class grew out of the Industrial Revolution, basically the establishment of the clerk. The clerical work went on, and that was the basis of the middle class. Now, as you just said, by the time the 50s were coming in, things were changing again. And certainly between then and now, the clerical work has basically disappeared.
Yes.
So indeed has a lot of the manufacturing work, which formed obviously the basis of the work that gave rise to the clerical work. And that's disappeared as well. So that the audience we're now looking at is not at all the same as it was in the late 19th century, which is parallel to the situation our brethren were looking at in the 1830s, where the situation they were in was nothing at all like what was happening in the late 18th century.
Yes.
And that's what I'm trying to establish, that if you look at society, you can explain what's happening to Freemasonry. If we don't look at society, we go back around the same old circle and fail again.
Yeah,
that's why I say in one of my other books I talk about the law of paradoxical intent. If you keep making mistakes, then look at your assumptions and do something different.
Yes.
We've got to do something different because we're assuming an audience that exists, which no longer does.
And I think that is critical. I mean, it is literally marketing 101. And when I say that, a long time ago, I read the book Marketing for Dummies due to my job after promote myself. And it genuinely was. The very first chapter was called Marketing 101. And it was about establish who your audience is before you even do a little bit of marketing, work out who your audience is in the first place to make sure you're actually going for the right targets. And I think, and I do think that is, and I think, sort of things are afoot, and, people are trying to make progress at it, but I think it does need a look from the, the larger scale to look at the, the whole, take in everything. I mean, one of the things that really did jump out at me, and this is one of the thoughts, was a line, I'd actually made a note of it, is to say, as a source of candidates, our existing members are declining, if not a spent force. And, that's just obviously just taking a very, very small snippet of a larger paragraph, a larger chapter. And it's one of those things that, yes, our social circles are getting smaller. And to be honest, if someone has been in Freemasonry for a number of years now, then what's really happening is we've run out of, let's say, friends and family, and anyone we know that might have been interested in joining Freemasonry normally would have made themselves clear to us. So we do need to look out of our existing social circles, don't we?
Well, yes. I mean, people say it's cyclical. I mean, we've not got any members yet. All we need is a few more members. Well, where are you going to get them from? Your pals and relations, if you've either they're Masons or they're not interested. Your average age in every lodge now is what, 60 something?
Yes.
So your social circle is smaller because at our age we tend not to make new friends very much. We have, and our friends, unfortunately, sometimes are suffering the effects of Anno Domini. So that audience that we used to recruit from is no longer there. So we've got to go and find new ones, which is why St. Lawrence Lodge uses its website very heavily and does a lot of things which other lodges wouldn't have done because it wants to get at a new audience. And the members we're getting in, and we initiate something like 4 or 5 every year, are very different from the middle class that we used to know.
Yes,
they tend to be actually more highly educated as well.
Well, all the links and everything will be in the show notes. But I forgot to mention earlier, but your lodge is St. Lawrence Lodge, which is number 5,511, which is in, I think you said earlier, Masonic Province of Essex, which is of course in the UK. And the website for that is stlawrence.org.uk. I'll just the spelling, because I know there's a few different...
lawrencelodge.org.uk.
Yes, and the spelling is ST for Saint, and then LAURENCE for Lawrence, lodge.org. So stlawrencelodge.org.uk, and obviously links in that will be
with the U, not the W. Most people spell Lawrence with the W.
That's what I wanted to spell that out because of course anyone listening to this can of course go onto the website, which is for the podcast is masonicpodcast.com/23, because this is episode 23, and all the links that we're going to be discussing into the books and all the websites will be in there. So any listeners who are driving or listening to this whilst out going for a morning jog in January, well, good luck to you. But listening to that, then it's easy. You don't need to be making notes. You can get all that when you get home. But sorry to sort of go off on a odd bit of a tangent there, but just to let people know. But you're saying you do use the website, and you're attracting a different type of person to obviously younger, sometimes a bit more educated, but not the classical middle classes that maybe the brethren who are currently in the lodge, those, when you said the average age of about 60, not really, they're looking at different sort of people, how they were when they joined, might be one way to look at it. Back, when they joined 30 years ago, it was a different climate, wasn't it?
When they joined, they were 40. So their actual cultural upbringing was all before that time.
Yes.
I was born in 1942. And, I remember the 50s as being quite shocking. It changed. We stopped being rule governed. We suddenly rock and roll was the...
And again, you mentioned that in the book. In the last 50 years, you have that breakdown of the rock and roll. And then, of course, going through the Thatcher years and, basically the whole climate of what people were going through as a whole.
And the nature of work changed, didn't it? I mean... we had a rise of individualism, certainly in the 1960s and through Thatcherism, of course.
Yes.
But then work dramatically changed, didn't it? I mean, we now find people having 2 or 3 jobs. We got the 0 hours contracts. a number of things of that order. The career has disappeared.
Yes. Yeah, it
People
used to
cannot
be.
expect to. Well, in the old days, you joined a bank because it was safe, secure, and the right thing to do. Now, most people would avoid joining a bank, perhaps.
Yes.
I don't know.
And
But
now people are, I think, as you say, that they're going for a job, or almost they're working not for a career but for the CV, so they can then get one job, so they can, knowing that they're going to be going to another job in a couple of years' time, and the working sector. That's, people are aware of that. No. Employers aren't offering people a job for life. They know that people are going to come along and probably move along in 2 years' time, hence all the 0 hours contracts. And it's just a different mentality, isn't it? And I think that stability, I wouldn't say has gone, but it's not so expected anymore from either side of the employee relationship. And I think it just gives a different mentality to people. And you said, of course, in the book as well, different breakdown of social society. It's people aren't, I mean, one of the things, people aren't going to five-a-side football things and social events, and it's just, people aren't being so active in clubs and societies as a whole. So not just Freemasonry, just the whole attitudes towards that side of things has gone, or
yes.
at least is, I wouldn't say gone, is breaking down.
Well, I think some of it's to do with the nature of work as well. If you are working 0 hours contracts, to take a very obvious example, you're not sure when you're going to work.
No.
Right? And if you're working contract work, the same thing goes. Or if you're working for yourself, an awful lot of people now, self-employment has grown dramatically because companies have downsized. So you're not certain of what's going to happen next week. Therefore, you cannot commit time.
Yes.
So people will take their enjoyment opportunistically, if you like. Look at golf clubs, for example. The number of people playing golf hasn't changed a great deal.
Right.
The number of people joining clubs is dropping quickly.
Right. Okay. So people aren't committing a monthly or annual payment. They're happy just to go and, to commit themselves. What they are happy to do is go along and pay and play, so to speak, when the time suits them. Yeah.
And in Freemasonry, we have to accept that. People cannot commit to coming along to LFI every week. They cannot necessarily commit to making every meeting.
Yes.
Because they don't know when they're going to be available. Now, if we don't accept that, if we say they're not good Masons, right, then we're going to miss out on this new audience.
Yes.
So we in St. Lawrence we're not happy about it in the sense that we want everyone at every LFI, but we understand it's not going to happen.
Yes.
We get, say, 12 or 14 people along to LFI. It wouldn't be the same 12 or 14 every week, for example. And you've got to recognize that this nature of time, the commitment time, the use of time has changed.
Yes.
People have been forced to change.
In fact, this was really illustrated. I won't say which lodge it was, but it was very recently, and some listeners might know which lodge I'm talking about. Installation the other day, and the summons said that it started at 4:15. So it's quite a very early one, and to be honest, it didn't actually finish. The festive ball didn't finish until about 10:30 at night, but that's beside the point. But 4:15, and we went there, and literally all that happened is the lodge opened at 4:15, and then they called off, and then they called back on again at 5 o'clock to then commence. It's a little bit odd. And I actually asked people and said, it's a bit odd starting early, because I actually first assumed because it was in January, I thought maybe instead of starting at 6 o'clock like most do, start at about 4 o'clock, and it means that instead of finishing at 10:30, we can finish at about 8, so people aren't de-icing their cars, late at night. People can get home. Great idea, but no, it just turns out that it finishes at the usual time, just starts early, and then someone said, well, don't worry, because if people can't make it to get here to start at 4:15, then because we call off and then we resume again at 5 o'clock, people can get here for 5. And I wanted to say to them, if people can't really get here for 4:15 because of their job, they're probably not really going to be able to get there for 5. And what you've ended up doing is added an extra hour onto a ceremony. And when I'd sort of pushed a little bit further and asked other people, it's because that's the way it had always been done.
Yeah, quite. Yeah.
And it really was sort of like, because that's what's always happened. And it is, granted, it is quite an old lodge with traditions. But what's happening is that, and that's just for installation, it might be that after ceremonies, they start at 6 o'clock. And it's just one of those things where once a year, if you can get the afternoon off of work. But it just kind of struck me as, everyone ended up just going out, cooling off, and they're just standing in the bar, which was shut at the time, for half an hour, literally just stood there, and then we all went back in again. And for me, it was just one of those things where I really felt like this, if for younger people, I mean, for myself, I'm self-employed, so I can sort of like work around. But for some people, that is going to be a bit of a problem. And just saying, well, if you can't get here for 4:15, you can get here for 5. Still, it just kind of felt a bit old-fashioned. And when they did say it's because it's what we've always done, it really did sort of ring a bell with me.
And I think Freemasonry has to change in and of itself as well. I mean, why Freemasonry? What are we here for?
Yes.
I'm not sure that Freemasonry in the last 100 years has ever faced that question,
Right.
What is it? What do we go for? What is it? What's it about?
Yes.
And in the book, I talk about the fact that we're very unclear about what Freemasonry is.
Again,
and if we're going to attract a new audience, we better be clear about it. We better say to them, this is why it's a good thing to do, why it's good to come to us. And there's all these negative statements we make about it. We're not this, we're not that, we're not a religion, we're not political. We don't worship the devil.
And
these things we say we don't do. Well, okay, well, what do you do?
Yeah, and that really struck a chord with me, because it was on the website, and you said, it's on the United Grand Lodge of England website. The first things that was saying, and of course, when people listen to this, things might have changed on there, but it's basically saying we don't do this, we're not this, we're not that, we're not this, and I thought that's so obvious. We're saying what we're not, but what are we? We're not actually defining. And I think that might be part of the problem is, people don't actually know. And again, you say, whenever someone says, when someone asks someone about Freemasonry, who is a Freemason, the normal thing is, we're not a religious organisation. We're not. And you don't. And then when it is about what do, you say, well, we give money to charity. And actually, well, yes, we do. And I think you also cover that in the book.
Lots of other organisations give money to charity as well.
And we're not and I think you break down, especially you look into what relief is and charity, and actually breaking down those little bits a little bit more. And I found that interesting because, of course, yes, we're a charitable organisation, as in more on the philanthropical. Hang on, is that right?
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy. Yes, sorry. Philanthropy. We do it on that side of things, but that's I'd say an offshoot. So to even say to someone we're a charitable organisation, although that is a positive, that's not really correct in the grand scheme of things.
I think it's an innovation. I think this emphasis on philanthropy, use the word that Hammer uses in his excellent book, Observing Masonry, is an innovation. It wasn't what we're about.
Right.
But I say that if you look at brotherly love, relief and truth, just put a colon after brotherly love, because relief and truth are just other examples of brotherly love.
Yes.
And that relief wasn't about philanthropy, it was about helping each other. We say that Freemasonry is not about helping each other. Well, it should be. It is, it always was.
I guess it's using explaining what the working tools are and those sort of things. Actually, when you look at it, and I guess the charge to the candidate in the Northeast on the initiation, it's giving something to it's not saying right you should be giving to charity all the time, but it's sort of like if a friend or brother is in time of need, or comes to you to ask.
Quite.
So I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing it. I'm not now saying hang on a minute, let's keep this money to ourselves and have a big party with it instead. But what I am sort of thinking is looking at that, and we've got to look at those sort of things when defining ourselves to really find out what we are and what we're doing, and then use that to maybe give a definitive what we are and what we're not. So, to put it into maybe the American term, is what would be what would be Freemasonry as a whole, the elevator pitch. If you had to explain it to someone in 30 seconds, what is Freemasonry, and you wouldn't explain it to someone by telling them what they're not. You can't prove anything with negatives.
Actually, it's St. Paul. Actually, goes back as far as St. Paul. Is that you can't blow an uncertain trumpet.
Right.
Well, that's what we're blowing is an uncertain trumpet, and I think that charity thing has come as a defensive mode. Because of the attacks on Freemasonry, we've said no. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. We give to charity. It was being defensive.
Yes.
why be defensive? We've got immense values ourselves. And for me, Freemasonry is very, very important, particularly today. Yes. Because you've mentioned religion earlier on. We're not allowed to discuss it in Lodge, but that's quite separate from understanding the role of religion today and the role of Freemasonry. I mean, religious attendance has dropped to levels which essentially mean that in society, religion has no real place. It doesn't do very much.
Especially in the UK
and things like that. But the Christian Church attendance is very low down. Even in Ireland, it's dropped down to sort of 8 to 10%, which is dramatic for Ireland.
Yes, and
now that's where values used to come from, wasn't it? Religious values. If they're not there, right, where are they going to come from now? I think that's what we can offer, which other organisations which are philanthropic can't offer, is the sense of meaning, the sense of purpose in life. And that's where my philosophical argument comes in. I maintain that we don't have any concept of the purpose to life anymore in modern society. And there are an awful lot of people out there feeling the need for it, and we need to offer it.
Yeah, I think, because I mean, being how old am I? I'm 37 at the moment. I'm sort of in that sort of range, and I can actually see that people aren't part of. I've kind of got one foot in the generation that sort of like were more regularly going to church, went to Sunday school, that sort of thing, and I've got another foot also in the generation of people who are almost actively atheists, because it almost seems trendy at the moment to sort of mock, I wouldn't say to mock religion, but there's there is that sort of people don't want to be. They don't consider maybe themselves Christian or Church of England or those sort of things that traditionally are on the census. I mean, there's the old joke about it where, when the census comes round, are you religious? You just tick the Church of England box and put it back in the post.
Or Jedi Knight.
Yeah, or Jedi Knight seems to is a growing religion. Yeah. But I think, what's happening is people might not be wanting to sign up so much to the, the larger side of things, not the, the larger organised religions. But because of that, people are now it's now feeling a lack of something, and they've got that sort of spiritual. They want something a bit bigger. Maybe again, you touch on loneliness quite a bit in the book and how that's another social factor. And so people might not be the regular attendants to church. They might not even sort of believe so much in the traditional sort of God or the from the Bible God. But there is the need for something, and I think you summarised it very well. When you as a suggestion would be, instead of replacing in the interview, because the interview before someone becomes a Freemason, some of the standard questions can be a little bit again traditional. Instead of asking people, are you religious? Do you go to church? Might be to replace it with, would you be happy to participate in prayers in lodge? And almost look at it.
Are you happy to drink the loyal toast? I mean, that's I say on a parallel, instead of saying you believe in a supreme being, which most people would say, well, I don't really understand the question anymore. If you think, the old man in the sky sort of concept that I've got, I mean, I would say that probably getting on for half of the clerical class don't believe that anyway. Certainly, no theologian goes with that view. But so it's not a question you can handle. Yes. But are you happy to participate in prayers? Oh yeah, fine, no problem with that whatsoever. Now, it's changing those questions, if you like, or changing the way we look at the society we're recruiting from. It's got to be. You say we've always done it that way. Well, that's not a good reason for carrying on doing that way. We say things like, does your wife know you're here? And is she happy for you to become a Freemason? Will she support you? Well, most people, do they have wives?
Yes.
An awful lot of people don't have wives. Whether they have partners or they're on their own, it's another issue. But I mean, the wife thing is an assumption which is no longer true. Yes. Wives are going to be supported. Why? I mean, yes, why not? I mean, but does it really matter to them? They got their own ways of doing things, their own hobbies. They're busy doing lots of other things. So it's that relationship that the man's supposed to be the breadwinner and things like this, and use his time and things like that. Well, no, forget it. That's an old think.
Yes. Yeah, and like the ladies' night, you could view the ladies' night that we have as the way it's termed, the ladies' night, and we're putting a night on to say thank you for our wives for letting us. It is a little bit old-fashioned.
Well, my wife
cringeworthy.
Yeah, go to ladies' night for that reason.
Yes. I know. I'm thinking this is the
if I want to go out during a dance, I probably won't go to that one, dear, she says.
Yes, but I can see, some of the older, more traditional ones are sort of like, well, that's, ladies' night, and but some of the more modern, more younger ones, might not have wives, but to be honest, you don't get support from your wife. She just doesn't mind you if you pop out every third Thursday of the month. Is pretty much there's that sort of support, but they've got their own lives. So to get to start thinking, right, you've got to. There is almost that battle of the sexes going on in quite an old-fashioned way. To, as you said, for the lady to be supporting the man, things are a bit more equal nowadays.
Well, in the early part of the 20th century, feminism began. Didn't affect us much until 1960s, 1970s. Would you say?
Yes.
And now it's a dramatic change, isn't it? I mean, we can't think of women, the male-female relationship, in the same way that our forebears thought of it.
Yes.
Some lodges actually ask their initiates or candidates, can you afford it? Have you made proper provision for your family first? A lot of their wives earn a lot more than they do. So feminism has changed the relationships. We've got to think of that as well. And for that reason also, I think it's about time we started talking seriously and working with women's Freemasonry. Because one of the things people say is Freemasonry is just a male organization. Well, is it? Well, a lot of women would disagree because women's Freemasonry is quite active. Now, if we want to learn about feminism, we want to learn about the male-female relationship, why not go and ask them? Freemasons like us, they even call each other brother. At the same time, it may be going a bit too far, I don't know, but I mean, if we're talking about the change in religion, isn't it about time we started talking to the Grand Orient of France?
Yes.
Which doesn't have, as we are, brethren will probably be aware, doesn't have the volume of Sacred Law open. But are they Freemasons? Is that a landmark? Well,
yeah, I mean,
I wonder what a landmark is anyway.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I was chatting to a friend of mine the other day. We bumped into each other at our lodge centre. He was there for a lodge of instruction. I was visiting a lodge. We're chatting in the bar for a couple of minutes, and it come up. Of course, this podcast that I do in the chair is done independently. Although I'm a member of a lodge that's part of the United Grand Lodge of England, they don't sponsor the podcast. They barely acknowledge it exists, to be honest. But they are. I am doing this independently, and that means I can basically talk to whoever I want. It's not like, I mean, to be honest, it's not like the United Grand Lodge of England probably tell Lewis Masonic what books they can publish on and what subjects. So but that means I can, as I'm talking to different people. The other day, one of the interviews was with a chap called Barris, who lives in Istanbul. He's Turkish, and we were talking about Turkish Freemasonry under the United Grand Lodge of England. To be honest, under their rules, that would be fine because they're all part of it. However, on a previous episode, I spoke to a lady called Helen Woodley, who is actually a female Mason. And in theory, I, under the United Grand Lodge of England, wouldn't really be able to interact, so to speak, with them because they're not recognised. The fact that they actually use the same lodge rooms at the same Masonic centre, and it's just one of those weird things that, so it's okay for me to sort of, to recognise this chap, 3,000-4,000 miles away in Istanbul, where I wouldn't say things are completely different, but they have the Bible, they have the Torah, they have the Quran open, they do a few other things. That's fine. Whereas someone who is in uses the same lodge room as we do, he has exactly the same things and basically exactly the same ritual, still calls the other brother, but they're female, isn't recognised by the United Grand Lodge of England. It was one of those weird sort of quirks where I thought,
it's odd, isn't it? Yeah,
it's quite odd.
We had a couple of white tables, and we got about 110, 120 people there. It was very good. We enjoyed it immensely. And the script of that white table is in one of the books, by the way. I mean, look, exactly what we did is in there. But we also had a number of our brethren are married too. or have mothers who are female Freemasons, including several Grand Officers. So we said, come along and to the white table, of course. Why don't you bring your regalia along with you? Because we're going to bring our wives and visitors in while we're wearing regalia into the lodge, so they can see how it sort of works. And it wasn't our people who said that's a bad thing, but the women's Freemasons said, no, you can't wear your regalia when there are men around wearing theirs.
Oh, right.
It was the other way around for what we expected.
Right. That's a bit of an odd
But
one.
they came along, we sat them in the Grand Officers area with our Grand Officers, and they had a wonderful time. We had a wonderful time.
That's nice. I mean, it is that's the sort of thing, building bridges. And I think, we do have to look at that side of things. And, just because, some traditions, and it does seem quite a complex area, to be honest. And sometimes you think, is it needlessly complex? Is it being complex for the sake of being complex almost? Or just because that's the way it was?
Well, yes. I mean, again, going back to the fact that society has changed and that people's relationship to work has changed, it's also true that people's relationship to senior management has changed.
Yes.
I mean, the trust levels now of senior management are at all-time low. The trust levels of lots of organisations, whether they're sporting organisations, banks or whatever, is at all-time low. So are we as Freemasons, is our senior management trusted? Well, of course, they're Freemasons. But are they recognising the fact that the audience that we are trying to attract has a totally different relationship towards bosses than the old one did? And the autocracy probably doesn't go sit very well with these people.
That's very interesting.
They're independent people, as you said. They're not got a career where they fear losing it. They've got CVs which they're keeping clean and polishing and burnishing. Now they're not going to take top-down management. They want to. They want to be involved. They're going to do their thing. They're going to help us and work in with us. But they're not going to just obey orders.
No.
And yet, doesn't Freemasonry give too many orders?
I mean, that's a very interesting way, to see things. I was on a committee for something, not Masonic, another society that I was a member of, and I know when I was the chairman of that society. On the committee, you had people there was one chap who's just in his 80s, actually, coincidentally, is a Freemason, but didn't realise that until actually only a year ago. But he had been in the army and had always had one way of doing things. Other people on the committee were people who had been self-employed for the last 10, 15 years. And trying to run a committee like that and that really showed me how you have to handle people differently. And so I guess, for me, that sort of illustrates what you're talking about, because I can actually see that. I was trying to chair a meeting, and on one side, you have people who are, well, here's my thoughts, that's what I say, but whatever the boss says, we do it. And you've got other people who are kind of like, wow, that's my idea, and if you don't like it, then stick it. And it was. I found myself really having to, manage different people, but maybe that management, so that's a very small scale, but you scale it up to Freemasonry and the hierarchy of it. I can see what you mean.
Well, we want new ideas, yes. We've got to do things differently. We want new ideas. We want people bringing into Freemasonry lots of new ways of doing things, so that we can get to this new audience. So creativity matters. Creativity and top-down management don't go together.
Yes.
If you're frightened of what the boss thinks, then you're not going to say anything out of order. You're not going to be creative, because creativity can imply failure.
Yes.
People say, if you're not failing, you're not trying. Now, our order tends to be very top-down. And it is controlled to a degree by the honours system, isn't it?
Yes. And people, I guess the people are doing things maybe to get their honours, and maybe not for the grand scheme of things, perhaps. And it's, looking at it to try to do what they want to do to get their honours, I guess. And once they've been recognised for it, then fair enough, they just need to turn up every third Thursday of the month and do their lodge meeting.
Yeah, but we get people doing things, acting against brotherly love. Within the honours system. They're competing, if you like, for honours. And I find that quite frightful. I mean, I don't know if you go along to installed masters, past masters lodges,
Yes.
things like and you're talking to someone and someone's looking over your shoulder all the time. They're looking for someone more important to talk to.
Yes.
Very uncomfortable, but it happens to us all.
Yeah,
unless you are very important.
Yes. The funny thing is, I'm currently in the chair at the moment, and I've been doing quite a bit of visiting, going around to other installations. And of course, you often get someone from the provincial team who are also going there to do their sort of visits. And it does stand out quite a bit that, they're there and they're sort of like going, hang on, I only ever speak to these people once a year when I come to visit, but suddenly they want to be my best mate now. And you can almost see them sort of think, and it sort of stands out a bit. And I think
we've got to change that because one of the things we have to change is that sort of situation, because if we want new ideas, we've got to take risks, I suppose. I mean, any creative thing is about risk taking. You're never always sure it's going to work, and if you're frightened all the time that he won't get it, or someone in the lodge won't get their grand honours or something like that, then you're not going to be able to do that thing. The messages will not follow up in the organisation. The problems will not be escalated up because people at the top don't want to hear bad things; they want to hear good things.
Yeah, it's actually
that's the feeling. I'm not saying it's true, but that is the dynamic that comes over with an honours system in an organisation like ours. And it's the same with knighthoods and that sort of stuff. It works the same way. If you pay £1 million, you get a knighthood or something. Well, if you put an awful lot of money into charity, you probably get grand honours. I mean, careful, we get the same sort of dynamic.
You also
so we want to. Grand Lodge needs to do the opposite to what it's doing. Instead of telling us what to do, it should be supporting us in trying new things.
Right.
Yeah? We want a reverse triangle.
Sure.
Not the top down, the hierarchical triangle of an organisation in a normal picture, but one upside down.
Yeah, where the rank and file almost are the people that make are driving it.
Well, Freemasonry lives in its lodges, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't live at
a quarter.
Freemasons Hall.
Yes.
Freemasons Hall for most people is a place where you meet and not much more. So I'm not complaining about the individuals. I mean, they're doing what they've always done.
Yes.
I'm asking them to change what they're doing as well as us to change what we're doing. I'm always amused when we install the new master and give him the Book of Constitutions and tell him that will answer all his queries. And the Book of Constitution tells you absolutely nothing about Freemasonry.
I guess it's the black and white.
None of the questions about Freemasonry are answered in the Book of Constitutions. Any more, for example, than the rules of golf tell you anything about the enjoyment of golf.
Yes, good point.
They tell you how to compete in golf. Well, most of us play golf, don't like to compete, we just play golf.
Yeah, I mean, I know how to play chess. When I say I know how to play chess, I know how the pieces move.
Yeah.
I do not know how to get you to move your pieces and I get you so that I've now got your king cornered. That I've got no idea on, but I do know that how the bishops move diagonally, and I guess it's that sort of thing. That's the Book of Constitutions. We're telling people, this will guide you, and it is just the black and white rules of it.
How wide a provincial grand steward's collar can be. Yes, I mean it tells you whether an audience a meeting can be cancelled or whatever.
Right.
No is the answer. But does it tell you how to recruit, how to find candidates, how to deal with problems within the lodge where people don't get on, how to handle the finances of the lodge?
And those are the problems that arise in a lodge.
And that's why I think Grand Lodge, upside down, please, start helping lodges understand how to do things rather than, I'm sure rules are necessary in any organisation. That's the institution, right? It's the practice, which is what Freemasonry does, that matters.
Yes.
And there's always a bit of a tension between institution and practice.
Yeah.
But the institution exists in order to help the practice, right? Not to prevent it.
Yes, I mean everything you're saying there. What's in there. You just listed basically what was on the agenda for pretty much every lodge committee meeting. Right, we've got to deal with the finances, we've got to deal with getting recruitment, we've got to deal with lodge websites, we've got to deal with all these things, and I don't think any of that is covered, as you said, in the Book of Constitutions yet. I mean, I was just told this will answer any questions you have, and I think we've got to acknowledge that maybe there's at least got to be a few additions to the Book of Constitutions and defining things. Not to
a book of rules is necessary.
Yes.
Book of Constitutions is necessary. I'm not saying it is not necessary. I'm saying don't see it as the be all and end all. It's not particularly important to practice of Freemasonry. So we want Grand Lodge, however, not to think about the Book of Constitutions all the time, if indeed it does, but to think about how it can support lodges in change, in a changing society. At the same time, we need to think of Grand Lodge, get Grand Lodge to think about and assist lodges to think about how do you work in a society where value and meaning has changed, where religion no longer gives, quotes, the purpose to life for most people. No, at least half of the UK say they have no religion. Now, it doesn't, like you said earlier, doesn't mean they're atheists necessarily, but they have no religion. Younger people up to the age of 25, 64% say they're atheists.
Right.
Now that's a big change, and that people up to 25 is our audience. That's what we want to get to.
Yes, that is the core audience, and unfortunately most of those, but I guess it's going back to it, looking at how we define what religion is, whether they're members of an organised religion. I mean, to be honest, part of me thinks that, if I was, chatting to someone who was thinking about Freemasonry, I could say, well, to be honest, you could believe in God, you could believe in, you could believe in Buddha, you could believe in, Vishnu or something, or you could, believe in the big guy with a beard sitting on the back of a turtle somewhere in space. You could, if you've got your own system, then technically.
Yeah, but I think what we really mean, I think, underneath that statement, you believe, you accept in supreme being, is what we really mean is, do you think values and moral behaviour matter? Right? Do you believe that, or do you accept that we need to create values, to live by values, to control our desires, if you like, to make our desires fit with our morality? Do we accept the need for values and morality, as opposed to accept the existence of a God?
Yes.
Now, I think there's a lot of people out there who are hungry for this, who really do want something like this and can't find it. They don't accept the existence of the old man in the sky. They don't understand. They don't get into theology. It's a pretty difficult subject. Although quite fun in my view, but they want to find somewhere where they can work with other people, not on their own, and be supported in, thinking some things matter.
Yes.
Right now, trouble with our society is increasingly people don't think anything matters. I give the example in the book, it's only a tiny example, of course, about red lights. Ever since I wrote that bit, I watch people at red lights. I rarely find an occasion where someone does not go for a red light where I'm at a crossroads.
Actually, just to say, this is the funny thing, is when I said earlier about how researched your book is, I remember this because in one of the footnotes at the bottom, it actually gives the formula of how the sequence of how long it stays on amber. Because actually I've read this, you wrote it. There's probably listeners going, what the heck have these two gone on talking about now? But it's, of course, if I just sort of set it up, in the UK at least, because we've got listeners around the world, but you have the traffic lights at red, amber and green. But once it's on green and it goes back to red, it doesn't flick straight to red. It goes on to amber first so that it's about to go. And I think it stays on there for if I recall, 1 second for every 10 miles per hour as the rough rule of thumb. So if it's a 40 mile an hour zone, before going on to red, you have 4 seconds of amber, and the average stopping time should be about 3.5 seconds. So in theory, you should never be able to go through a red light, isn't it?
Right.
That was that's the theory behind
it. Yeah, essentially that. But people actually go through lights when they're red, when they could have stopped a long while ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the excuse. And I think you said about, one putting cameras on there, it stopped people, but actually more because they wanted to avoid the fine, not because not to get caught about it.
It's not moral order. You might kill someone.
Yes.
And most accidents happen at crossroads.
And it was to actually, they weren't so worried about, the avoiding the accident. It's because they actually wanted to avoid getting caught and having to pay £60. Then I think you also mentioned that some people, in a way, that's actually just a cost sometimes that you've got to bear if you want to get somewhere quicker. So it's some people are actually willing to take the risk and go, if I get caught and I've got to pay a £60 fine, well, that's fine because I'm a very important person with very important things to do.
Yeah, I mean, I say, in fact, it's like prostitution and banking. The fines are treated the cost of doing business.
Yes, and actually, that's for. I was going to mention it earlier when we were talking about banking, and of course, some part of the psychology, and not just to do with the moral decline and how all the banks have been fined and everything, but how with the actual traders. What was happening with them is, they were all communicating with each other. The bosses obviously knew it was all happening, but generally what was happening is if you get away with it, then great. If you end up making losses, well, that's part of business.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like the philosophy behind almost the tradings, and just how, and that sort of thinking has, filtered down. And that's why we don't always trust the management side of things, because they just turn the blind eye when it suits them.
It's part of the loss of value, isn't it? Values, loss of meaning in life.
Yes.
But you're annoyed about that. I'm furious about it. My wife's furious about it. A lot of people are furious about it. And a lot of people want to do something differently and be a member of something that does things differently. And I think that can be us. And I think what we can be and should be is a society which protects morality against the barbarisms of the outside world. That a society which enables people to trust and to be trusted, to preserve the value of trust, which in society is declining rapidly.
And actually, this the last podcast, podcast 22, I had with an American chap, Juan Sepulveda, who's runs his own podcast actually, and he's also now starting to set up a little side project, basically for people that maybe don't want to join Freemasonry because they're not too sure what it is, but just to go back to, how should we say, the old values, being a gentleman again, because he's realised that actually people might not want, and it might be that people join this and then end up sort of, I think it's more of an online community, and people might then find out about Freemasonry through it. But I think he's trying to tackle it, not to have so much of the religion aspect, but at least just try to the virtues of people. To try to, there's people out there who need they want that sort of security. And I guess after getting messed around by governments and businesses and banks, and, it just seems to be quite a backstabbing type society. It might be that, if people partly are always online, they're maybe watching soap operas, and every night they see people having all these arguments and doing things behind each other's back. And so that naturally just rubs off on them, and they think, well, that's just how society is. So in a way, they've created it themselves.
That's why we need to make a positive statement as an order that this is what we're about.
My thanks once again to David West for taking so much time to talk about what I hope you would agree is a very important subject. We covered lots. That's only the first part of the conversation. We go into much more detail in the second part, which is going to be episode 24 that comes out next week. You can find that, or to make sure you don't miss it, make sure you subscribe. If you haven't already, go to masonicpodcast.com/iTunes if you're an iTunes user. That'll take you on there. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, or on Stitcher, masonicpodcast.com/Stitcher, or just search for In the Chair on either of those. Hit the subscribe so you'll, when the next one comes out, you'll be able to get that downloaded automatically, so then you'll be able to have a listen to it as soon as it comes out. Pick up on that. I know we've touched on some subjects. It might get close to a few nerves in places. Part 2 is even more so, I must admit. It is very interesting listening to. As I said, it might not be comfortable listening for everyone. but maybe the people that maybe find it's not so comfortable, maybe other people that maybe need to acknowledge some of the things we talk about. As I said before, we are doing, I put this out completely independently. The books that David writes are independently, but I think keeping that independence means that we can have these sort of conversations, and we're not having to, how shall we say, toe the party line. We can have these frank and open discussions, and I think by doing this, by David putting these books out, by me doing these podcasts, means that you guys, as the rank and file, or even just the people who are interested in Freemasonry, get a much better idea of what Freemasonry is, and openly we're saying, there are some sort of problems that we do have there, and how we're tackling those problems, and how maybe you might be listening to it and go, yeah, but this is something that I do want to be a part of, and I'm happy to be part of this, and I know this, and I think I can come in, and I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I can help turn these sort of things around. So that's why we're sort of putting this out. So many thanks once again to David. The show notes on that are masonicpodcast.com/23, and that again links you to his books, and you can sort of read more. Also, I mentioned it last time round. I am a professional magician and mind reader. I do close-up magic, mingling around as also stage cabaret shows, mind reading acts, that sort of thing. And I mentioned that because I'm doing a discount in the UK, of course. Although if I have got a passport, if you want to fly me out somewhere, I'm open to options. But of course, I work at weddings, I work at corporate events, Christmas parties. I know Christmas has just gone, but people are planning for, the coming Christmas already. Ladies' nights, obviously, where I can go around the tables, and I can even do a bit of cabaret. And I'm also doing a 15% discount. So if you contact me and mention Masonic Podcast, either go onto my website, a little box, or drop me an email, or as someone did the other day, contact me through Facebook. Let me know the details. To go onto my website, it's easiest way to find it is masonicpodcast.com/magic. That will redirect you through, and you can find out more details. Contact me. Make sure you mention that you heard about me on In the Chair, the Masonic podcast, and I'll make sure we sort out the 15% discount for you. So that was masonicpodcast.com/magic. So many thanks. I'll mention that, and I know if some people have got in contact, it's really appreciated. As I say, I'm doing this independently, so of course any way to cover the hosting costs for putting out the Masonic podcast is greatly appreciated. So once again, thanks to David. His book was Managing the Future of Freemasonry, and also Masonic Recruitments. As I mentioned, he's also got other books out there which are also worth the read. I've been Robert Bone. I hope you've enjoyed episode number 23. Make sure to stay tuned for episode 24, where we're going to be picking that conversation up, and I will speak to you again next week.
Thank you for listening to In the Chair. Visit masonicpodcast.com to see the show notes and in-the-chair.co.uk for more resources to help you get the most out of your Masonic journey. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by rating and reviewing it on iTunes. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Twitter at Masonic Podcast.